remember that that nap time parody video on YouTube? You know, the one with like all the parents losing their minds trying to get their kids to sleep?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, we've all been there, right? It's like, but what if I told you that like understanding the science of sleep, especially for children, could like totally change your approach to like their development and maybe even your own?
And all ears.
That's exactly what we're doing today, diving into the science of sleep. We've got a bunch of articles from like places like Harvard Medical Magazine, the Sleep Foundation, Stanford Medicine, the NIH, and Moore's Kids Health.
Wow. Sounds like a comprehensive deep dive.
Oh, it is. And trust me, this isn't just for like parents or teachers, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who's ever felt that like brain fog after a bad night's sleep or the pure joy of a good nap will get something out of this.
I think we've all been there.
So one thing that really like threw me for a loop in the Harvard article was this whole biphasic sleeping thing.
Biphasic sleeping.
Yeah, apparently like before the Industrial Revolution, people in a lot of cultures actually slept in like two separate chunks each night.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, they'd like wake up in between to socialize or do stuff around the house.
That's wild. Like, how would that even work?
It really makes you think about like how our modern sleep patterns, especially with like consolidated sleep, affect us.
Especially for kids, right? Their needs are constantly changing.
Exactly. And speaking of kids' needs, one thing that like every single one of these articles emphasizes is how crucial it is for them to get enough sleep.
For sure. Can't argue with that.
Like we're talking 14 to 17 hours for newborns, 11 to 14 for toddlers, 10 to 13 for preschoolers.
Yeah, those early years are all about sleep.
And even 8 to 10 hours for teenagers.
Teenagers need their sleep too.
But why are those numbers so important? Is it really all about just avoiding a cranky kid?
It goes way beyond just crankiness. All those recommendations are based on a ton of research on how sleep impacts everything, from hormones to brain development, physical growth, immune function.
Wow, so like a lot more than just being tired.
Oh, yeah. For example, growth hormone is primarily released during deep sleep. So if kids consistently miss out on those deep sleep cycles, it can actually have an impact on their physical growth.
That's fascinating. So like it's not just about behavior, it's like their bodies need that sleep.
Exactly. And then you have cortisol, the stress hormone. Sleep deprivation makes cortisol levels go way up, and that can weaken the immune system and even increase the risk of things like obesity and diabetes later on.
Okay, wow. So I'm starting to see those recommended sleep times in a whole new light.
It's really incredible how much sleep affects our overall health.
But I have to admit, as a parent, sometimes life gets in the way of those perfect sleep schedules.
Happens to the best of us.
What about those nights when a child just doesn't get enough sleep? Is it like all hope is lost?
Well, the Kids Health article makes a good point. One night of missed sleep isn't going to like ruin a child's development.
Yeah.
It's the chronic, consistent lack of sleep that we really need to be concerned about.
Okay, that's a relief. Now, one thing that like really stood out to me in the Harvard article was this analogy of the hippocampus being like a short-term filing system in the brain.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to think about it.
It says it needs to be like cleaned out during sleep. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. So the hippocampus is this little seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain, and it plays a huge role in learning and memory.
I'm picturing a tiny seahorse filing things away.
It's where new information gets stored temporarily. Think of it like a sticky note on your brain's desktop.
Okay, I can see that.
Then during sleep, especially during REM sleep, the hippocampus gets busy sorting through all that new information. The important stuff gets moved to long-term storage, making space for new learning, and the less important stuff gets deleted.
So it's like hitting the save button on your computer after finishing a document, except it's happening in your brain while you're asleep.
Exactly. And research has shown that this is super important for children.
Makes sense. They're learning so much new stuff all the time.
There was this study by Rebecca Spencer that found that kids who napped after learning new words remembered almost twice as many words the next day compared to those who didn't nap.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah. And the benefits lasted even into the following day.
So those afternoon naps aren't just about avoiding meltdowns, they're like actually making them smarter.
You could say that naps and sleep in general give your brain the time and space it needs to organize and solidify everything it's learned.
So we should be thinking about like scheduling quiet time after school or incorporating naps more.
It could make a big difference in how much information sticks.
That's a great takeaway. It's like those naps are actually tiny brain boosting sessions. I'm definitely going to think about that.
It's amazing what our brains do while we sleep.
So we've talked about the good stuff that happens when we sleep, but what about when we don't? I'm guessing it's not just about feeling a little groggy.
You're right, it's not just grogginess. The consequences of not getting enough sleep can be pretty serious, actually.
Okay, so like how serious are we talking here?
Well, it's linked to an increased risk of a whole bunch of health problems, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and even some types of cancer.
Whoa, okay, that got my attention. I knew sleep was important, but I didn't realize it was connected to all that. Like, how does missing sleep lead to such serious stuff?
It all goes back to those hormones we talked about earlier. When you don't get enough sleep, your body produces more cortisol. That's the stress hormone. And that can cause a whole cascade of negative effects.
Right, so it's like your body's always on edge.
Exactly. High cortisol levels can mess with your metabolism, making it harder to regulate blood sugar. And that increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
So it's not just feeling tired, it's like a constant state of stress.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
And that chronic stress really takes a toll on your system over time.
makes sense.
There's some fascinating research in that Stanford article about how sleep deprivation can even affect how our immune cells work.
Our immune cells.
Yeah, it makes us more vulnerable to infections and could even contribute to the development of cancer.
Okay, that's definitely not something I want to mess with. And it's not just our physical health, right? What about mental health? I think one of the articles mentioned that too.
Absolutely. Sleep deprivation can seriously impact our mood focus and how we deal with stress. It's linked to a higher risk of anxiety, depression, and even impulsive behaviors.
So, like, it affects how you think and feel.
Exactly. And for kids and teens whose brains are still developing, the effects can be even more intense.
Oh, wow. So it could actually affect how a child learns and handles their emotions.
Exactly. Think about it. When you're sleep deprived, you're more likely to feel irritable, frustrated, and overwhelmed.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's harder to pay attention, learn new things, and control your impulses.
Yeah.
Now imagine a child going through that every day.
That's got to be tough.
It can really affect their ability to learn, socialize, and cope with the normal stresses of being a kid.
Makes those meltdowns after a bad night's sleep seem a lot more understandable.
It really does. And it's not just about those meltdowns either. Remember that study about the hippocampus and word recall? Well, sleep is also crucial for how we process and make sense of our emotions.
Like filing those emotions away, too.
You could say that when we don't get enough sleep, that process gets messed up.
Okay, so that's why we get extra emotional when we're tired.
It can make it harder to deal with difficult emotions and could even contribute to anxiety or mood disorders.
That makes so much sense. So we know chronic sleep deprivation is bad news, but what about pulling an all-nighter every now and then? Is that really something to worry about?
Well, the occasional night of short sleep is probably not going to have any long-term effects. It's still important to know the risks, though. Even one night of missed sleep can really mess with your focus and reaction times.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not exactly at your best when you're exhausted.
Right. And one of the most shocking stats I read was in that Kids Health article. It said that driving while sleep deprived is just as dangerous as driving drunk.
Seriously. Wow, that's a scary thought.
It really highlights how important sleep is, not just for our own health, but for the safety of everyone around us.
That's a good point. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the history of biphasic sleeping to the scary stuff that can happen when we don't sleep enough. But what are some of the biggest challenges to getting enough sleep these days? Like, I feel like there's so much competing for our time and attention.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of these articles, especially the ones from Harvard and Stanford, talk about that.
Mm.
One of the biggest culprits is our always-on culture.
Like, we're always connected and expected to be productive.
Exactly. With technology at our fingertips all the time, it's so hard to disconnect and unwind.
I definitely struggle with that. And it's not just adults, right?
Like kids and teens feel it too. All those notifications, social media updates the pressure to get good grades and all the extracurricular activities. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like they're always on the go.
And I'm sure socioeconomic factors play a role too. That Harvard article talked about how things like income, housing, and even neighborhood safety can impact a person's sleep.
That's a really good point. It's not just about having the willpower to go to bed on time.
Right. Things like stress, noise, and even the temperature can affect sleep quality.
So for some people, it's like they're facing these extra hurdles just to get a good night's sleep.
And for families dealing with poverty or living in unsafe neighborhoods, those factors can be even harder to overcome. It's a reminder that sleep isn't just a personal responsibility. It's influenced by social and environmental things too.
That's such an important point. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of sleep, the bad stuff that happens when we don't get enough, and all the challenges we face in getting enough. But what can we actually do about it? I feel like we've talked about all the bad stuff about sleep.
Yeah, it can seem a bit overwhelming.
So is there any hope? Can we, like, actually improve our sleep with everything going on?
Absolutely. All of these articles give some really great advice and strategies. It's not like one magic solution, though.
Okay, so what should we focus on? Where do we even start?
Well, one thing that pops up a lot is having a regular bedtime routine.
Yeah, I've heard that, but honestly never really done it. What does a good bedtime routine even look like?
It's all about, like, sending signals to your body and brain that it's time to wind down.
Oh.
Like dimming the lights an hour or two before bed,
Yeah.
taking a warm bath, reading a book,
Mm-hmm.
or listening to some calming music.
So basically anything that helps you relax.
Exactly. And it's about sticking with it even on weekends.
Oh man, that's tough.
It helps regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, making it easier to fall asleep and wake up feeling refreshed.
Okay, so routine is key. What about all that stuff about limiting screen time before bed? Is that really a big deal?
It's definitely a good idea.
Mm.
The blue light from screens can mess with your melatonin production.
Melatonin.
Yeah, it's that hormone that helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle.
So even just reading on my phone before bed can affect my sleep.
Yeah, it can. Those short wavelengths of blue light basically trick your brain into thinking it's still daytime, making it harder to fall asleep.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So we should like avoid screens completely for an hour before bed?
That's ideal. But if you can't do that, even dimming the brightness or using a blue light filter can help.
I'm totally guilty of scrolling on my phone in bed. I'm definitely going to rethink that. What about other tips for like a sleep-friendly environment?
Temperature's important. A slightly cooler room is best for most people.
How cool are we talking?
Around 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, got it. And what else?
Make sure your bedroom's dark and quiet.
Yeah, blackout curtains are a lifesaver.
And consider a white noise machine if you need it. Oh, and don't underestimate a good, comfy bed and pillows.
It really is amazing how much those little things can matter.
Totally. And lifestyle choices matter too, like exercise.
Exercise helps you sleep.
It can. Just don't do it too close to bedtime.
Okay, good to know. Any advice on food and drinks?
Avoid caffeine and alcohol before bed.
Yeah, those are a no-brainer.
They might feel relaxing at first, but they can actually disrupt your sleep later.
Right. And what about eating late?
It's best to avoid big meals right before bed too.
So basically all the things my mom used to tell me.
There's a reason for those old sayings.
Okay, so we've talked about routines, environment, lifestyle. Is there anything else we should keep in mind?
One big thing is that everyone is different. What works for one person might not work for someone else. It's all about finding what works best for you.
Right. So like no one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly. And that Sleep Foundation article had a great section on sleep disorders.
Oh, right. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's more than just bad habits.
Yeah, if you're really struggling, don't hesitate to talk to a doctor or a sleep specialist.
Okay, so professional help is always an option too.
And don't get discouraged if it takes some time to find the right solutions. Sleep is a journey, not a sprint.
You know, it's funny. We started this deep dive talking about that silly video of parents struggling to get their kids to sleep.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
But what's become clear is that sleep is way more than just a parenting issue. It's a basic human need that affects everything.
It really is. And the more we learn about the science of sleep, the better we can take care of ourselves.
It's like the secret superpower we've had all along. So to everyone listening, I hope you learned some new stuff and maybe feel a little more excited about sleep.
Sweet dreams.